In this clip, I'm just going to give you a very brief revision on some maths that we can do with right angle triangles, namely Pythagoras' theorem and trigonometry. I am not teaching these as if I would from scratch, as if you've never seen them before. So these are purely to refresh your memory about what you actually need to do to answer exam questions. So if you don't know anything about Pythag or Trig, this isn't the place to start. So first of all, we'll look at Pythagoras, which is grade C skill. So you're more likely to come across this around about the middle of the paper on an intermediate tier paper. Whether we're talking about Pythag or Trig, the first thing that you need to do is recognize and name the sides of your right angle triangle. And what you need to be able to do is identify which side is the hypotenuse, which side is the opposite, and which side is the adjacent. And usually that's the order that you would deal with them. For Pythag, you only really need to know which one's the hypotenuse. So first of all, you need to be sure that you are working with a right angle triangle, and the signal is either the question will tell you it's a right angle triangle, or you have this little box which indicates that that's a right angle. The hypotenuse is the longest side in a right angle triangle, which often is obvious, but if it's not, then it's also the one that's pointed at by the box in that right angle. So if you imagine that that is an arrowhead, it's saying over there is your hypotenuse. Similarly here, if that's my arrowhead, it's pointing over here. So that's my hypotenuse. So that's dealing with the hypotenuse. The next one is the opposite, and the opposite is the one that's opposite either the angle you're given or an angle you're trying to find. So in this one, I'm given that that angle is 35 degrees, so the opposite is this one. In this triangle, I'm trying to find this angle, which means that is my opposite. And then the adjacent is the one that's left. So that's going to be my adjacent. That's going to be my adjacent. So you need to be able to correctly go through that process of naming the sides of the triangle. When we come to Pythag, again, I'm not going through the whys it works or how it works. I'm just giving you a process to deal with, which is easy to remember to enable to access these questions on an exam paper. So the first thing to do is to square the sides you're given. So if it's on a calculator allowed paper, you can use the x squared button to square. With this example, I don't need it, because when I'm squaring 10, I know that 10 times 10 is 100. When I'm squaring 8, 8 times 8 is 64. Common mistake to make there is to double. You're not doubling. It's not 10 times 2, it's 10 times 10. So you square the sides you're given. Then you have to look at what you're trying to find. Are you trying to find a shorter side? Are you trying to find the hypotenuse, the longer side? If I'm trying to find a longer side, then what I do to these numbers needs to make the outcome bigger, so I end up with a bigger value. If I want to find a shorter side, what I do to these numbers has to produce a smaller number, because I want a shorter value, a smaller value. I'm either going to be adding or subtracting those squares. So here I'm trying to find a shorter side, so I'm going to be doing 100 minus 64, which is 36. So the square of this side is 36. So I've squared, I've decided what I'm going to do, and I've subtracted because I want to find one of the shorter sides. Now I have to do the opposite of squaring. Now the opposite of squaring is square rooting. It's not halving. So on your calculator, the square root button is there. I know what the square root of 36 is anyway. It's 6, because 6 sixes are 36. So I've squared, I've subtracted because I'm trying to find a shorter side, and then I've square rooted my answer, which gives me that as 6. It doesn't matter about the accuracy because it's a whole number. So my answer is 6 centimeters. That's Pythag. You're only dealing with sides, nothing to do with angles. When it comes to trigonometry, this is a grade B skill, so it's towards the end of the paper. On the numeracy paper, it's usually the very last or last but one question where you'd be dealing with trig. So you use it if you know an angle on the side and you want to find another side, or you want to find an angle and you know two sides. What you need to learn is the relationships between the sides, and what you learn in year 9 or year 10 is this so car toa, which you write in triangles just as if you're doing distance, speed and time. So the triangles look like that. So the first thing you do is label your sides, the hypotenuse, the opposite and the adjacent. Based on what you know and what you're trying to find, you need to choose which one of those trig relationships is going to help you. Then you cover up what you're trying to find. So if I want to find the opposite, sine of the angle times the hypotenuse. So the angle is linked to the sine, the cos and the tan part. And then the letters at the left will tell you whether it's divide or multiply. So you've made all your decisions, then you can do the maths. So let's have a look at these two here. So this is when we want to find an unknown side. So let's imagine we want to find that side, because I haven't made that clear. So hypotenuse pointed to there, opposite and the adjacent. So I need to have the ratio which has got the opposite in, because that's what my question mark is, and I need to have the hypotenuse in it because that's 8. I don't know anything about the adjacent and I'm not asked to find it. So I'm looking for the one that links opposite and hypotenuse. This one, opposite and adjacent, adjacent and hypotenuse, opposite and hypotenuse, it's this one. So if I write that down, that's what I'm using. And I want to find the opposite, so I cover that up. So it's going to be sine of 35 times the hypotenuse. So the opposite equals sine of 35 times the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is 8. So on your calculator, before you start with trig, it's always important to check that your calculator is in the right mode. That little symbol there where my pen is pointing should have the letter D in it. If it doesn't, then you're not set up for your calculator working in degrees. And what you then need to do is go to setup, which is shift and mode, and change, press 3 to make sure that you're in degrees. Okay, so I'm in degrees. I'm going to now type in exactly as I see it there, sine 35. It's important you close the bracket to say you finish working with angle, times 8. So to one decimal place that will be 4.6. If I'd have wanted to work out the adjacent, then that would have been adjacent and hypotenuse and I'd have been using cos. So if I wanted to find that one, I'd be using CAH, and to find the adjacent, it would be cos of 35 times the hypotenuse. So with this one now, it's the angle I want to find. So naming my sides, here's the hypotenuse, that's my opposite, this is my adjacent. So to find the angle, I'm looking for the relationship between opposite and adjacent, which is tan. If it's the angle you're trying to find, that's linked to the tan bit of it. So tan of x equals opposite over adjacent, which is 6 over 5. Now to get at the angle, you've got to break, you've got to undo the tan, which means you end up having to do the opposite of tan. And if you look at your calculator, the opposite is the button, the function above it, which is tan minus 1. So when you're working with angles, to find an angle, you're either going to do sine minus 1, cos minus 1, tan minus 1. On your calculator, exactly as it looks there. So I'm going to do shift tan, fracky, 6 over 5, close bracket. So it looks exactly as I've written it there. Press equals 50.2 degrees. When it comes to rounding with questions like this, what you would tend to do is, if it doesn't ask you for a particular degree of accuracy, work to 1 decimal place or to the same number of decimal places that they measure the sides or the angles in the question. So that's a whistle-stop reminder of what you need to learn with regards to right angle triangle maths in intermediate tier papers.